Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending the webinar today. My name is Tim Raditz. I organize the Discovery Farms Minnesota program for the Minnesota Agricultural Water Resource Center. Today, I'll be talking about our Discovery Farms drainage water management project at Farmamerica near Waseca, Minnesota. I will be kicking off the meeting, giving an overview of the project. Then Scott Madison from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, who are our monitoring partners through the Discovery Farms program, will be giving an update on the water data collected at these sites in 2023. Jessica Rawlings from Farmamerica will then be giving an overview and update on Farmamerica. And finally, Warren Formo with Minnesota Ag Water Resource Center will be providing an update on Southeast Minnesota nitrogen concerns. We'll be taking questions from the Q&A box in Zoom. Please use this feature if you would like to ask us any questions. Please use the chat box if you're having issues with anything on the Zoom feed, and we'll do our best to address them. First, a little bit about Discovery Farms. Discovery Farms is a farmer-led water quality research and educational program. The Discovery Farms idea originated in Wisconsin about 20 years ago, and there are now Discovery Farms programs in Wisconsin, Arkansas, Vermont, and the state of Washington, along with Minnesota. All Discovery Farms programs have the same three pillars: farmer leadership, credible research, and sharing the results. In Minnesota, the program has a steering committee comprised of farmers and conservation professionals. This group guides the overall direction of the program, reviewing results, and selecting new projects. We also partner with the Minnesota Department of Ag to collect water quality data, and they are some of the leaders in collecting this edge-of-field water research in Minnesota. Their partnership allows us to have a high-quality data source for use in educational meetings and events. Funding for our program comes from a number of different sources. The basis for our funding is through the Minnesota Corn Growers Association. We also receive funding from the Minnesota Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment for monitoring equipment and the involvement from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. We compete for other grants to expand our projects, and this project in particular that we'll be talking about today, the Drainage Water Management Project at Farmamerica, is primarily funded by the USDA NRCS. So what do we do? What kind of data do we collect within Discovery Farms? We collect edge-of-field water quality data on real working farms across the state. We focus on surface water runoff and tile drainage flow from the edge of field. And what we mean by the edge of field is exactly what edge of field, why we say edge of field. We set up our monitoring equipment on the edge of fields. We are monitoring weather and soil variables as well, measuring the amount of water that leaves the field and sampling that water for sediment and nutrients, primarily phosphorus and nitrogen. Our sites are automated so that we are sampling and measuring 365 days a year, which is really important to get a full picture of water in Minnesota. We have worked with 14 farms throughout the state with our automated monitoring equipment, covering a diverse landscape from the coulees of southeast Minnesota to the beach ridges of northwest Minnesota. We have also covered a diverse set of agricultural enterprises, from corn, soy, to dairy, to swine, to beef, and poultry. As of this year, we are working with 5 farms in Stearns, Wright, McLeod, Redwood, and Waseca counties. I wanted to give some context or give some background on tile drainage to provide context of what we are looking to do with this drainage control management project. Why do we drain? Well, first is to improve plant growth by allowing roots to grow deeper. This improves growth and yields. We also do it to improve the timeliness of field operations and trafficability on our farm fields. And finally, the addition of tile drainage on our farm fields reduces the amount of surface runoff that we can see, and with that, reduces the risk of soil erosion. There are some challenges with tile drainage in terms of water quality. It has the potential of moving soluble nutrients off our farm fields. There is an increased risk of losses. And in Minnesota, this risk can affect water quality as the MPCA, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, states that an estimated 67% of the nitrogen load in rivers is delivered by row crop tile drainage in heavily tiled watersheds. So if we're thinking about our soils and the type of water that our tiles are removing, we can picture our soils as a sponge where we have some pore space and some solids. And this pore space can range from 35 to 55% depending on the soil type and soil structure. And the solids range can range from 45 to 65%, again, depending on soil structure. And this pore space can be filled with all air or all water or any variation in between. Have it being filled with all air or all water, either of those situations is bad for agricultural crops. We don't want to limit the amount of moisture that our crops can use. That'll impact crop growth. And we need some air. It can't be completely saturated for our crops, our agricultural crops to grow sufficiently in Minnesota. So if we look at, this is a graph showing soil water in particles, soil particles on the top, and a graphic of tile and tile flow on the bottom. The only time when our tiles are flowing and collecting water is when we're at the point of saturation to gravitational water or saturation to field capacity. And this is where gravitational water moves with gravity down to the tile and is available to be removed with our tile systems. As we get to a certain point called field capacity, this is where no water is moving freely with gravity, but there's still a sufficient fraction of water in the soil profile to provide moisture needs for plants to grow. Now, if we're looking at our whole Discovery Farms data set, we've collected data on a number of farms throughout the state over a number of years. And if we pull out just our sites where we're collecting surface water runoff and tile drainage at the same location on the same field, we come up with these different graphs to show kind of what route our water is moving through and what route our nutrients and sediment are moving through as well. So if we look at the top left, we're looking at combined runoff or combined flow through surface runoff or subsurface tile. Surface runoff would be in the orange and tile would be in the blue. So about 3/4 of our flow comes through surface runoff in any given year when we compare it to, or 3/4 of our flow comes through tile drainage in any given year when we compare it to surface runoff. If we look at TSS yield, which is a measure of sediment loss on a field, we can see almost entirely all of our sediment movement comes through surface runoff, this orange fraction. Very little sediment movement coming through the tile systems. This is similar if we look at phosphorus, where we see a large majority of our phosphorus move through the surface water runoff and not through tile drainage. What we are focusing on today and what we focus on with our tile drainage projects is this nitrogen fraction. Nitrogen, in particular nitrate, most of it moves through our tile systems. This is because nitrate is a soluble nutrient and can move freely with water. So when we're concerning ourselves with tile drainage, nitrogen is the main nutrient we're going to be looking at to see if we can prevent some losses to our surface waters throughout the state. Now, if we're looking and plotting up our nitrate nitrogen loss on the y-axis here versus our tile drainage amount, you can see there's a very good correlation between the amount of drainage and nitrate nitrogen. So as drainage increases, our nitrate loss also increases. And these are at all sites across Minnesota, all cropping systems, all farming enterprises. So the idea here is if we can reduce our drainage, we're going to be able to reduce our nitrate loss. Because if we reduce the amount of water, we're going to reduce the amount of soluble nutrients that leave with that water as well. So that's where drainage water management comes into play. And drainage water management is the process of controlling water discharges from fields with water control structures. And it has the potential to improve water quality by reducing the amount of drainage and also potentially farm production by hopefully holding some water back for the crops to use during later seasons where we might see more dry conditions. This here is a graph of, or a graphic of a typical drainage water management control structure where you can change the level of board depth in these situations, and those board depths will correspond to water table levels within the field. So here's a graphic depicting conventional drainage where the water table is lowered to the level of the tile. In contrast, if we're looking at controlled drainage, you can alter the board depth here in the control structure and raise or lower the outlet elevation and corresponding the water table elevation in that field. Now, the idea behind this is to alter that water table depth throughout the year with after harvest, increasing the level of those boards to hold back more water. When we get into spring, ready to plant, reduce or lower that water table depth so we can get into plant, and then gradually rise, try to keep some back during the growing season to hopefully provide some water for the crop, but also not drown out the crop while it is growing. Here is our monitoring setup at our Farmamerica location. We're looking at 4 monitored watersheds. We got the North 1 watershed, where we're looking at this top section of the field. It's 49.8 acres. This Middle North watershed, which is 11.7 acres. The Southwest watershed down in the lower left corner here, 21.8 acres, and the Southeast watershed, which is 14.4 acres. And we also have weather station equipment installed at our Middle North watershed. And the idea behind this, and we're currently in the baseline data collection phase, we are not implementing controlled drainage at any of these sites currently. We're hoping to get enough data through last year and through this year to get some baseline data collection. And after this year, we will then begin to use control or drainage water control at 2 of the sites and leave 2 of the sites as conventional drainage. So we have some good comparisons as to what our drainage water management is doing for water movement, nutrient loss, but also crop growth and yields. This field is part of a bigger tile system. You can see here of a bigger watershed. The field we're working in is defined in yellow here. All the flow here goes to the south and through this green box on this aerial photograph that I'm showing here. And this is a constructed wetland that was just constructed recently with the updates to this drainage system. And so with this constructed wetland, we're also monitoring inflow in terms of the amount of flow and looking at nitrogen concentrations, nitrate concentrations on the inflow versus flow out of this constructed wetland, looking at the amount of flow and also nitrate concentrations there as well, to get a better handle on what some of these practices are doing to help improve water quality. Oh. We're also collecting some soil health data with a partnership with Minnesota State Mankato and Dr. Mark Bowen. He's going to be examining the impacts of tile drainage on soil physical and chemical properties. The purpose is to examine how conventional and controlled drainage will impact the hydric and non-hydric soil physical and chemical properties. And they'll be doing this by getting soil sediment cores from fields with different tile drainage histories in this project. So we're really excited for that. I think they're out collecting data this week as we speak. And finally, the goal of this project through our grant with NRCS, USDA NRCS, is to increase the adoption of drainage water management in southern Minnesota by focusing on demonstration, education, and outreach. And with that, I would like to introduce Scott Madison, and he can talk to you about our 2023 water quality results from our Farmamerica project. Scott, you can take it away.
All right, thanks, Tim. Share my screen here. So welcome out to the site. It's in my background here. Yeah, today I'm going to be talking about the 2023 data that was collected last year. Let's see. Problems with advancing. There we go. I'm going to skip over this one because Tim went through this slide. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the Farmamerica data from 2023. We work on the water year, so that is October 1st through September 30th. That's how we work up all the data for all the farms. Tim showed you this map of the site, the 4 plots that we're doing the monitoring. I will mention that those 2 northern sites were in a corn. So they're in a corn soybean rotation, but they were in corn last year, and the 2 southern watersheds were in soybeans. So we started the monitoring as soon as we could get out there, get the equipment installed. We did have some equipment failure at that northernmost site, so we did not get a complete year of data. The other 3 watersheds to the south, I would say we captured at least 95% of the flow data. Last year, samples were all grab samples because we did not get the majority of the equipment installed until May, and a lot of the flow had already occurred by that time. So everything last year was grab samples going out right after the rain or in between events. So we'll look at a few pictures first. The tile was installed December of 2022 into January of 2023. As you recall, a year ago, we had a lot more snow than we've had this year. I looked at Wasika, they had 72 inches of snowfall in the winter of 22-23. This year, they're at 12 inches. So there's a 5-foot difference in snowfall. And of course, that's the year that we had to install the equipment. Made it a little bit difficult in the spring. You can see there, a lot of the snow melted the end of May and early April. There was a lot of infiltration, which was really good for the soils and for the crops, but it made putting in monitoring equipment very difficult. Pictures on the bottom there are showing when we started the initial flow monitoring. We had some of these standalone level loggers, they're called, that we could put into the agri-drain structures to get a continuous record of the flow. But we had to wait later until getting most of the other equipment in. And I'm not going to talk about getting the truck out of the field. This is when the majority of the equipment was installed in May of the year, mid-May. By the end of May, we had everything in. This is kind of showing you what the setups look like. So there's 4 of these setups out there. One of the sites has a weather station, so we're getting solar radiation, temperature, wind speed, wind direction. We also have two of the sites with tipping bucket rain gauges. Two of the sites have soil probes where we're measuring soil temperature and soil moisture at 6-inch and 24-inch depths. And then if you look at that upper right-hand image there, all of the sites have nitrate sensors where we're getting continuous nitrate, and that's recorded every 15 minutes. So it's kind of a newer thing that we've been adding to the sites. The cost on nitrate sensors has really come down over the years, which is made it available for us to install it at the Discovery Farm site. So it's a really nice level of detail that we're able to obtain. And then we also have the water level sensor that's recorded. So all of this data is recorded every 15 minutes. And it's recorded to the data logger shown in that bottom center image. Going forward here, starting this year, we'll be using automated samplers for all the sample collection. So that data logger is recording the water level in the bottom of that agri-drain structure, and we're using a V-notch stop log at the bottom. And based on the water level through that V-notch, the data logger will convert that stage measurement to a flow rate. The automated sampler is triggered by the data logger for flow-based sampling. So every site's different. It's based on the watershed size, but we set it up so many gallons of water that go through the tile line. It triggers that sampler. The sampler will put about half a cup of water into a 2.5 gallon jug. Once that jug is full, we'll go out, we'll collect the sample, mix it up, pour it into lab bottles, send it to Minnesota Valley Testing Laboratory in New Ulm, Minnesota. That is where all samples go for all Discovery Farm sites. And then it's tested for total suspended solids, phosphorus, dissolved phosphorus, and then nitrate, total Keldol nitrogen, and ammonia, and also chloride. We also have a time-lapse camera and motion-activated camera at the site. So we're taking pictures of the field daily to kind of track the conditions in the field and the crop growth, using the motion-activated portion of it so that we can get the field activities that are taking place. And it worked very well last year. You can see there the soybean harvest, October 3rd, and then the corn coming out November 7th. Getting into the water quality data, first we'll talk about precipitation. Again, as I mentioned, we're looking on the water year, so it's October 1st of 22 through September 30th of 2023. Overall, it was a very dry year. That's what most people remember about it. We were nearly 7 inches below the 30-year normal. But it's really a tale of kind of two different parts of the year. If you look at November of 22 through May of 23, it was actually all of those months were at or above the normal for precipitation. So that was a very wet period. Like I mentioned, that 72 inches of snowfall during the winter. But then it just dropped off. It just stopped. We had a really big rain in the middle of May, and that was kind of the last big storm. The months of June through September, those 4 months were over 10 inches below the 30-year normal for rainfall. When we look at the rainfall compared to what we saw coming through the tile drainage, it ranged from about 19 to 28% of the precipitation that fell in the watershed ran off through the subsurface tile. Now this is looking at annual runoff or drainage, however you want to call it. Same thing. We put it in inch units here. So again, that northern site N1, that's where we had equipment issues. So it's not comparable to the other three, but the other three were all monitored for the same period of time. What you'll notice there is the amount of flow through those three watersheds is not equivalent. There is some differences. We saw a range of anywhere from 6 inches up to just below 9 inches of drainage. As far as how long those tiles ran, they averaged about 99 days, so just over 3 months of tile flow. And then that red line on there is looking at all the data from, I think we have 14 different farms over the since 2011. just looking at all that data together, all the tile sites that we've monitored, what is the average? And the average comes out to about 4.75 inches of runoff through the tile lines. So you can see that these plotted a little bit higher. So it was a very dry year. We had very little flow after the spring, but overall it was a fairly high flow year for the tile drainage. Monthly runoff. It's interesting here is 87% of that drainage or runoff occurred during just 2 months, April and May. Again, from that huge snow melt that we had, and then from that high quantity of rain in May. This is the hydrograph for the 4 sites. So this is the 15-minute flow data. You can see the blue line on there. That is the northern site that did not start logging until later in May. But the other 3 sites we did start at the end of March, and that's when the tile lines really started to open up and to flow. And then that corresponds with when the soils became thawed. That was about the first week of April. Getting into the water quality data, first thing we're going to talk about is total suspended solids. As Tim mentioned, that is normally primarily sediment. It can also be organic matter. When we broken that apart, we see that for farm runoff, it's mostly sediment. But these numbers are extremely low. We've ranged from 3 to 6 pounds per acre of TSS through the tile. As Tim mentioned, most of the sediment that you see from the field is through the surface, very little through the tile. And this is no exception. Looking at all the years, the average is 13 pounds per acre for all the tile sites. This is total suspended solids, full weighted mean concentration. So basically you're taking all the water that came through the tile line for the entire period and mixing it up and taking one sample. It's the overall concentration or overall average of all the water. And you can see the range here is 2 to 4 milligrams per liter, very, very low. The detection limit for the laboratory is 2 milligrams per liter. So most of these samples were clear water, clean water from a sediment standpoint. Phosphorus yield, we saw a range of 0.03 to 0.05 pounds per acre. If you look at all the tile sites for Discovery Farms over the years, we average about 0.1. If you look at surface runoff, I believe that average is about 0.9. So as Tim mentioned earlier, most of the phosphorus that we measure is through the surface runoff, not through tile drainage. But even looking at all of our tile sites, these are very low numbers. Now, we did not have the automated samplers installed last year, so that's probably why our numbers are this low. Because really the only time we see phosphorus in the tile lines is kind of right during those big storms when maybe we're getting some preferential flow or a little bit of movement of phosphorus down to the tile lines. But you know, with grab samples, it's common to find very low phosphorus. So these are the concentrations, 0.02 to 0.03 milligrams per liter. Looking at all the data we've collected, this is about as low as it goes. Very low numbers. Now, looking at total nitrogen, it goes the other way because most of the total nitrogen from the farm field is through the tile drainage. We saw a range anywhere from 15 to 24 pounds per acre based on site. So there was some differences among the sites. That compares to about 19.4 pounds when we look at all the data that we've collected for Discovery Farms. It's kind of right in that range there. And this is interesting, I think. Concentration, when we look at flow weighted mean, the 4 watersheds are very similar. I mean, I'd pretty much say they're the same. They range from about 11 to 12 milligrams per liter. And, you know, I had mentioned that those 2 northern watersheds were corn last year and the 2 southern soybean. But it didn't seem to make a difference last year. The other thing to notice with the total nitrogen is that almost all of it is in that nitrite form. You can see on there the purple takes up about, I think it was like 97% of the total nitrogen was in the nitrate form. Nitrate plus nitrate N. So just a couple slides here, and why do we have to have this calibration period? I think I've kind of already showed that, because if you just were to assume that you'd get the same amount of drainage from all four of these watersheds, you'd be wrong. This is just looking at those southern watersheds. You can see this is showing the depth grid, it's called. You can do this in GIS, where it's basically showing you if you had a big rain, where would you expect water to be pooled on the surface of the fields or on the landscape. And looking at this, you can see that maybe that southwest area is a little wetter. When we look at the comparison of those two watersheds, we saw 18% more runoff through that southwest watershed, and 26% more nitrate loss. So they're not equivalent. There will always be there will often be differences between watersheds that are even in the same field, same area. What's important when we're looking at this is not that there's a one-to-one relationship, that they're both the exact same, but that there's a good correlation between the data. And that's what we're showing here with these charts on the right. How do those monthly values plotted against each other, how do those line up? And you can see there's a very good correlation. You look at nitrate yield, they don't plot on the black line, which is a one-to-one relationship, but the monthly values do plot very nicely against each other. There's a good correlation. So where we sit right now, over time, we have had no flow since the first week of July. So we're waiting for flow. It's been about 9 months now. Going over, talking a little bit about that pond that Tim mentioned. So we're working with the Schiefert family. They have a pond that they installed in the fall of 2021. There was an improvement project with the county main that runs from their property up to Farmamerica, where it was an 18-inch tile. It was improved to a 24-inch tile. And to help mitigate increased flow, they wanted to work together to mitigate that maybe increased peak flow. So they have this pond that has a 24-inch inlet, but it has an 18-inch outlet. And our goal with we're going to be looking at here is to quantify the peak flow reduction, and then also if there's a nitrate reduction from that pond. Tim showed you this picture, so it's showing the 24-inch inlet into the pond and then that 18-inch outlet. So the design, technically this is called a surge pond. The design it's focused on reducing the peak flow, but we're hoping to see if there is some nitrate reduction also. We took a few preliminary samples last year, so these are just grab samples. We have no flow data. As I mentioned, the tiles were all dried they stopped flowing by the first week of July. So this is very low flow into the pond. We saw about a 1 milligram per liter difference, so about a 10% reduction in the nitrate. But it'll be interesting to see, at different flow rates, what that reduction and over time, how that might change. We're in the process of getting this thing, the pond instrumented with the nitrate sensors and the flow equipment. All of that data will be put online. We have a website with all the real-time data for all the Discovery Farm sites. It's mda.onerain.com. So it includes all the Discovery Farm sites, but we have a specific project dashboard for Farmamerica. So if you go on that website, select dashboards from the top, and then select Farmamerica Discovery Farms Minnesota, you'll be able to see the 15-minute data for rainfall, all the weather conditions, soil moisture and temperature, stage data at the tile sites, and then flow data at the pond, and then nitrate data for all the sites. So here's our contact information. I also work with Katie Rasmussen. She's on Discovery Farms too. She works out of the St. Paul office, and I work out of the Mankato office. And if you feel free to email either one of us and if you have any questions.
Well, thanks,
All right,
Scott.
thank
That
you.
was excellent. And I'll point out that One Rain website is a great website to get real-time weather data and to see if water is moving off the fields. It's very user friendly, and they've done a nice job with that. If people want to see the data, it's nice and easy to see that. We don't have any questions here. I'll remind people they can use the Q&A box if they're interested in asking us any questions. We'll take questions after each individual speaker, but also at the end. So if you're thinking of some questions for the end of the meeting, we'll be glad to answer them then. All right, up next is Jessica Rollins, who is the executive director of Farmamerica. So thanks, Jessica, for being with us today.
Yeah, Tim, can you see my screen okay?
Everything looks great.
Awesome. I'm going to go for it. So thank you guys for joining us. I want to give you a quick little commercial about Farmamerica. We've been talking a lot about our about the project on our property. So I want to, if you weren't sure who we were, I want to let you know who we are. We were founded by the state of Minnesota by a group of legislators in 1978. So 45 years ago, with a mission to connect Minnesotans to the evolving story of agriculture through hands-on educational experiences, partnerships, and community engagement. So my next couple of slides will just show you some of the cool stuff we have going on here. So we are 360 acres, and a good over 200 and some acres of that is actually farmland, the Discovery Farm site that you saw. Some fields that are north of this little graphic map that you see here. And then the fields that are kind of tucked in the middle here. So we're farming those in partnership with Crystal Valley Co-op, and they're able to utilize the data and research from both the Discovery Farm site as well as some of their own fields that we're letting them farm, and sharing that information with farmers and consumers to help them better understand good farming practices and what seeds work, what seeds don't. So neat agronomic partnership happening there with Crystal Valley Co-op. And otherwise, we have this 1 mile walking path that you see on the screen here. So the state founded us. We do receive a small amount of funding from them still. Otherwise, we apply for grants and request donations. We have an endowment fund, membership season pass holder, and then we do get the income from the crop sales at the end of the year from those fields that we own. So our 1 mile walking path is really designed to help people see the evolving story of agriculture from the 1850s, with a little country school and a country church and a log cabin, and then a 1930s farm site. So you can see the progression. We have livestock there in the warm weather months. We will have farm baby animals joining us on April 20th and 21st. So you'll have to come down and check those little guys out. They're going to be super adorable. We have a feed mill with a classroom space in there, a blacksmith shop, and then our visitor center at the bottom of the screen, which we do rent out for business meetings and wedding events, that sort of thing. But blah, blah, blah about graphics. I want to show you some cute pictures. So this is just some of our space. It's a beautiful space no matter what the season is. In the top left, you can see ETS, Environmental Tillage System, using their Soil Warriors strip tillage equipment to strip till some of our farmland here. And on a little snowy day, they are doing that. And then the rest of them are just some of our beautiful spaces. You're wondering what audience do we serve? Typically third graders through adults. We do a lot of field trip groups in the spring and the fall. We do a lot of self-guided and guided tours in the warmer weather months. And we're usually drawing for field trips from about a 70-75 mile radius. You can see that on the screen there. Much longer than that, and students get antsy on a bus, and they don't enjoy sitting in those seats, and neither do the teachers or the chaperones. This past year, we had quite an increase in attendance. We're really kind of picking back up after the pandemic years when we had to be shut down. And we're anticipating at least 10,000 folks visiting us here in 2024. So why the increase? Well, because we're increasing some of our really cool experiences that we're offering for folks. This is a list of our regular events that we have going on, our field trips, a fall festival, specific day camps, and then a day camp during MEA break in October. New this year, we're doing a Farm to Fork series. So here's my next little commercial for you. On June 13th, if you like to golf and you like to eat and drink, we're doing a fundraiser for Farmamerica called Chip In for Farmamerica, where all the golf shots are just chip shots into pieces of farm equipment along our 1 mile walking path. And then at the end, it's drinks along the way. And then at the end, we have a farm to table dinner experience at our 1930s farm site. So that one will be fun. We have a Taste of Time progressive farm to fork dinner. And so that progressive meal will be happening on August 8th, which I know is the last day of Farm Fest for those of you in Minnesota. So quick close up shop there and drive down to us in Waseca for that event. So lots of opportunities is what I'm saying, no matter what the age of the audience. We have fun things happening, including goat yoga. So something for everybody to help them feel connected to that story of agriculture. Within our visitor center space, we did recently update our welcome lobby to include some modern exhibits about today's agriculture, focusing on sustainability, best management practices, benefits of GMO technology, that sort of thing. So those exhibits are in the welcome lobby. And then additionally, in our visitor center, we have the Ag Around You Discovery Center space, which is designed to look like a typical home. And everything in there, as you open drawers or watch videos, is going to show you how it's directly connected to agriculture. So people can leave that space feeling like they now know that agriculture is all around them every day in their lives, in their homes. And that's been a fabulous exhibit space for us to have for those field trip groups and for those young students to have aha moments that they really are still connected very relevantly to the story of agriculture. We just added the Ag Co exhibit. They had a farm life game happening in their Jackson location, and they needed to remodel that space. So we inherited their exhibit, which is really for an older audience, maybe middle school to adults, to help them pretend they're a farmer and walk through different scenarios and problems and have to figure out a day in the life of a farmer and get a little score at the end to see if they're better than their friends at pretend farming. So a good mix of history and modern happening at Farmamerica, and we're always looking for ways to expand that as we come across additional grants that can help support our programs. That's my whole update for you about Farmamerica. And look at that, I did that in under like 7 minutes. So that should keep us on track for our schedule. Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you, Jessica. Excellent update. I would encourage anybody that if they haven't been to Farmamerica, they should go take a visit. It's one of the cool, exciting things about this partnership is we get to use their facility. Sometimes they have an excellent facility and do a lot of excellent work there. So really great partnership to get some water quality research on this site that's serving agricultural education needs for a number of people in the region. So with that, next up is last but not least, Warren Formo with the Minnesota Ag Water Resource Center. I see there's a question on the Q&A. We'll address that after Warren goes, because it has to deal with conservation drainage. So welcome, Warren, and you're here to give us an update on some of the nitrate concerns in Southeast Minnesota.
Yes, well, thanks, Tim, and welcome to everyone. And so we're going to switch gears a little bit. And I don't have slides to go along with. I just wanted to give you kind of a report and the latest information of where we're at relative to this issue. Just for background, for those who may not be as familiar, about a year ago, last April, a group of a dozen environmental organizations filed a petition with US EPA seeking EPA intervention to address drinking water nitrate concerns in the karst region of Minnesota. And they specifically listed 8 counties in Southeast Minnesota. And those counties are Dodge, Fillmore, Goodhue, Houston, Mower, Olmsted, Wabasha, and Winona. And certainly, the karst and geology doesn't follow county and state lines. So those counties are not 100% karst. And there's a small amount of karst in a couple of other counties that weren't listed, but the vast majority of the Southeast karst region is made up of those 8 counties. Karst geology, basically what we're looking at is fractured limestone with varying amounts of topsoil on it. And so as we get deeper topsoil on top of that karst, it's more protected. But where there's very little soil, there's less protection. And so it's a very complicated area in terms of how water moves, and there have long been known nitrate concerns in groundwater. So this petition essentially requested that EPA step in and investigate the sources of nitrates. It seeks to require responsible parties would supply free water testing and free water supplies or sources for those who are affected. And then it also asks for further regulation of livestock and manure, including potentially a moratorium on new or expanded livestock farms and further restrictions on fertilizer use. So that petition was filed last April. And then in the fall, EPA contacted the state agencies who are associated with the petition, which are the Department of Health, who has jurisdiction over drinking water, the Department of Agriculture, who has jurisdiction over fertilizer use, and the Pollution Control Agency, which is responsible for feedlot permitting and manure management. So those three agencies were asked by EPA to put together a work plan to address these nitrate concerns in southeast Minnesota. And in January, those three agencies jointly announced their plan going forward. And basically, they have short-term, medium-term, and longer-term strategies. Short-term, as might be expected, the Department of Health will be leading those strategies, which basically call for more water testing and education to make sure people know what water they are getting from their well. So it'd be conducting education and outreach to encourage more well testing and providing well testing for residents in those 8 counties. And then where necessary, providing alternative water sources for those affected. Longer term, there'd be more education, more ongoing well testing, and then further efforts, recognizing that mitigating nitrates is going to take a long time, but providing clean water can be done very quickly through things like water treatment or alternative sources. Longer term, the Department of Ag will play a larger role in ongoing research and work to promote BMPs, further implementation of their nitrogen fertilizer management plan, and the associated groundwater protection rule to help farmers better manage nitrogen fertilizer and be more efficient, and also reduce impacts to groundwater sources. The pollution control in the long-term strategy also has a role to play on the manure side, and they will be reviewing feedlot permits and rules, looking for ways to reduce those impacts, and also looking at ways that wastewater treatment plants might reduce the nitrogen coming out of their facilities, as that has also been identified as a potential source of nitrogen in the region. So I want to just first of all emphasize that those agencies now have pledged and are already working to address the issue. And the other group that we want to acknowledge is farmers throughout the region. We know that farmers, recognizing the environmental sensitivity of the karst region, have been long doing conservation practices, specifically around timing of nitrogen applications and the like, to in an attempt to reduce nitrogen impacts from agriculture. We also see, since this petition was filed a year ago, a tremendous amount of effort being spent by farmers, the local soil and water conservation districts, and the Department of Agriculture, hosting meetings, getting farmers together to talk about strategies, really focusing on things like cover crops, precision nitrogen management, getting the rates and the timing right to get the very lowest losses that are potentially possible, and while also maintaining the ability to be productive. And so farmers are playing a big role in this as well, and we want to commend them for all their efforts. Then finally, we expected that the petition might result in some legislative action. And so I have kind of a laundry list of legislation that has been introduced, some perhaps with ultimately statewide effects, but most of them centered really on those 8 counties in southeast Minnesota. And so these are not in any priority order. They're just, like I said, it's a laundry list of bills that have been introduced. Various committees, various legislators have different strategies for how to address the issue. And so I'm just going to mention some of the proposals that are out there, and hopefully that'll give you a sense of where the legislature might be going with some of these ideas. So first, there has been a bill introduced that will require that in any drinking water supply management area, which are basically the wellhead protection areas around community or public wells, wherever a drinking water supply management area has been shown to have elevated nitrate levels, all manure applications in that area would need to come under a manure management plan. Currently permitted, the larger permitted livestock operations are required to have a manure management plan. This, as proposed, would require all manure applications to be done with an associated manure management plan. In Minnesota, we have a program called AFREC, the Agricultural Fertilizer Research and Education Council. It's been in existence for a little more than a decade, and it is funded through a tonnage fee of 40 cents per ton collected by the Department of Agriculture on all fertilizers sold in Minnesota. For the past 12 or 14 years, AFREC funds have been used to fund research and education around improving nutrient management efficiency, both for all nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and others. But that program was written into law about 15 years ago with the sunset. So I mentioned that because there are two bills related to the Southeast nitrate concerns that would let AFREC sunset, so would let the fertilizer research and education piece sunset, but would then would continue to collect the fund and create new funds to focus on drinking water. So the first of those bills would create a drinking water assistance account, and funds then collected through this fertilizer tonnage fee, which would be raised to 99 cents per ton from the current 40, and then increasing in 2 years to $1.39 per ton. Those dollars would go into this fund to be provided back to those 8 counties to assist private well owners in mitigating nitrate concerns. The other, I guess I could use the word competing, they're very similar proposals. The other one would let the AFREC funds end, but would create a clean water, climate smart, and soil health account. And essentially, or initially, it would be rolled out as a pilot project in Southeast Minnesota with objectives of making it a statewide program over time. And the primary practices that would be incentivized would be things like no-till, strip-till, cover crops, and precision agriculture. And the other change with that is that the current AFREC funds are administered through the Department of Ag. This legislation would shift that over to the Board of Water and Soil Resources. Then there are several other bills that would essentially idle land in various ways. And so the first of those would expand the RIM program, Reinvest in Minnesota, to provide greater eligibility in the karst region and in trout stream watersheds. A second one would provide $5 million as an additional incentive for those who enroll in the Federal Conservation Reserve Program. And so focusing on those counties, if a landowner chose to put some sensitive land in the CRP, the state of Minnesota would provide some extra dollars to encourage that to happen. There would also be there are 3 bills that together provide about $7 million for acquiring permanent conservation easements specific to Southeast Minnesota. And also part of those funds could be used to actually acquire lands, fee title, and then a combination with permanent conservation easements to improve grassland, prairie, and other habitats and provide wildlife habitat throughout that region. So, as I said before, not all of these are likely to become law in the end, but those are all proposals that we see. There's also an additional $3 million for Ag BMP loans that would be made available specifically in Southeast Minnesota to help farmers do whatever practices, buy equipment, those things that are needed to do more practices. There is also a proposal to provide a $5 per acre tax credit for all farms in those 8 counties who are certified under the Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program. And so if you are certified, you potentially would get a $5 per acre tax credit. And finally, there's about $917 million, or excuse me, $917,000 that would be appropriated to the Department of Health for their part in the well inventorying and well testing throughout Southeast Minnesota to identify those higher nitrate wells and help those private well owners achieve a safe, clean drinking water source. So that's the laundry list. As I said initially, there's, it's hard to tell which ones will make it all the way through to become law. Keep in mind also that the deadline in our legislature for policy bills to be introduced is tomorrow. And so after tomorrow, we'll see the full list. But as of today, that's the list that we are aware of. And so now we'll just watch the legislature over the next couple of months for their part of it. And then also we'll continue as an ag community to work with the state ag agencies where they have roles, as I've previously talked about, and continue to work with farmers throughout that region, whether it's promoting of practices. Next week, for example, we're going to be at a Nitrogen Smart meeting where we will be offering free nitrate screening. And so if farmers bring a water sample from their well, we'll be able to provide them with an analysis of their drinking water for nitrates. So with that, I'll stop, Tim, and I'll see where you are at with questions.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Warren. Lots of updates there. It's been a busy last few weeks. I'm impressed how you try to keep up with all that. So while it might not directly impact our Farmamerica site, there is some ties between we're interested in nitrogen movement and in the tile. There's lots of things happening on nitrogen movement in the karst area in Minnesota. So I encourage you all to keep up with those legislative workings as they come about. We do have one question here before we wrap up. We got 3 minutes left here. I want to get everybody out by noon so you can get off to doing other things with your day. Les asked, if a farmer has 1,000 acres of corn and soybeans, how many controlled drainage gates would she have to install and manage? And what is being done to automate or allow remote management of the gates? Well, Les, even though I don't work for Extension, I'm going to give you a standard Extension answer and tell you that, well, that depends. It depends on your landscape. So a lot of this controlled drainage practice will work better and easier in flatter landscapes, meaning that they can only hold back so much water. So if you have too much drop, your ability to control that drainage is going to be less. I will also say that they've come up with some buried gate structures that increase the ability for us to overcome some of those elevation challenges. So there are some new technology with this practice that has expanded it a little bit, but it still works best on flat landscapes. They do make automated drainage control structures. We are not using them with our project, where ours are manually operated, but they do make automated ones where you can manage that water table remotely. So there is options out there and technology out there to make it easier. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. We will be posting this recording on our YouTube channel if anybody wants to take a look at it later. I'd like to thank Scott with our Minnesota Department of Agriculture for providing that nice update on our water quality data. Jessica for providing that update on Farmamerica. So if people weren't aware what Farmamerica was, now you got a better idea. and Warren for keeping the pulse on the legislative actions that are happening. So with that, just like to say thank you and tell everybody to have a great day.